The first time we heard the signal, we believed it was a mistake. Space is not silent, despite what primitive civilizations once believed. It breathes with radiation storms, whispers with dying stars, and hums with the quiet chatter of 1,000 interstellar empires. Our listening arrays in the Orion sector have cataloged those sounds for centuries. We know what belongs in the darkness, and what does not. The signal did not belong. It appeared at exactly 0317 station time inside Listening Array Theta 7, a relay station so distant from the Coalition's core worlds that its operators often complained about the boredom of eternity. There are regions of space where nothing happens for decades. Or so we thought. The transmission arrived as a narrow-band pulse, repeating every 11 seconds. At first, the automated filters flagged it as debris interference. Old satellites drifting through signal corridors often create strange echoes. But the echo repeated, perfectly, again and again. Within minutes, the station technicians escalated the anomaly to the Coalition archives. That is when it reached me. My name is Archivist Saltharan of the Galactic Coalition Historical Authority. My duty is simple. Verify the past so the galaxy does not misunderstand it. When the data packet arrived on my console, I expected nothing more than corrupted noise. Instead, I found a voice, a human voice. The translation algorithm struggled for several seconds before stabilizing the language. The dialect was ancient, Terran Standard, centuries out of date. Humanity. The word alone was enough to freeze my secondary hearts. Humans were not supposed to exist anymore. According to every verified historical archive, humanity had destroyed itself long before the Coalition ever unified the major galactic powers. Their species had been recorded as a cautionary tale, an intelligent civilization that advanced too quickly and collapsed beneath the weight of its own wars. A tragic extinction, a footnote in the long history of the stars. And yet the voice continued to repeat through my speakers, calm, measured, military. This is a defensive broadcast from Earth Orbital Command. I leaned closer to the console, every sensory node focused on the transmission. Unknown vessels approaching this system should turn back immediately. The signal crackled with age, fragments of interference scratching through the words like scars across old metal. This system is under human protection. The message repeated again, and again, and again. I checked the timestamp embedded within the signal. 217 years old. Impossible. No automated beacon could survive that long without maintenance. Solar storms, cosmic radiation, orbital decay, any one of those forces should have erased it decades ago. Yet the signal persisted, not degraded, not fading, repeating like a heartbeat in the void. I transmitted an inquiry to the Coalition database, searching for the coordinates hidden inside the broadcast packet. The answer appeared seconds later. Earth. Classification: pre-extinction civilization. Status: destroyed. Destroyed? I stared at the word for several long moments. Then I replayed the signal again. This is a defensive broadcast from Earth Orbital Command. Destroyed civilizations do not broadcast warnings. The realization unsettled me enough that I requested immediate authorization for a field investigation. At first, the Council believed the anomaly was a relic, a drifting beacon from an extinct species, nothing more. But the signal's strength continued to increase, as if something had recently repaired it. Within 48 hours, a Coalition research vessel, the Silent Cartographer, departed for the coordinates. I volunteered to accompany the mission, not out of bravery, out of curiosity. Humanity had fascinated me since my earliest days in the archives. Their recorded history was chaotic, violent, irrational by most galactic standards, yet strangely inspiring. A species that fought impossible wars and survived disasters that should have erased them long before they discovered faster-than-light travel. But they had vanished, or so we believed. The journey to the signal's origin required 12 hyperspace jumps. During the final approach, the ancient broadcast grew stronger until it filled every communication band aboard the ship. Repeating, waiting, warning. This is a defensive broadcast from Earth Orbital Command. Our captain finally muted the audio feed after the crew began complaining about the repetition. But the silence that followed felt worse. 3 hours later, we arrived. The navigation display marked the system simply as Sol, a single yellow star, 8 primary planets, and one world highlighted in blue, Earth. The moment our sensors activated, the bridge fell quiet. At first, the readings appeared exactly as expected for a dead civilization. Atmospheric composition, normal. No large-scale industrial output, minimal electromagnetic pollution. A peaceful world. Too peaceful. Then the long-range scanners detected the debris. Thousands of metallic objects drifting through orbit. The tactical officer assumed they were fragments of ancient satellites or asteroid collisions. But the deeper scans told a different story. These were not rocks. They were ships. Warships. Broken hulls rotated slowly through the void, some split cleanly in half, others reduced to twisted skeletons of alloy and shattered engines. Their sizes ranged from small frigates to massive carriers, longer than entire cities. And there were so many. The debris fields surrounded Earth in concentric rings like a graveyard frozen in time. I felt my lower limbs tighten with unease. "Identify origin," the captain ordered. The scanner operator hesitated, then spoke slowly. "Unknown designs, Captain. None match coalition construction patterns." Another pause. Then the operator added something that made the air on the bridge grow colder. "Some appear alien." Of course they were alien, but not the kind we expected. The shapes were unfamiliar even to the coalition's vast military database. Hull geometries from dozens, perhaps hundreds of civilizations. Empires that once ruled entire regions of space. Empires that had disappeared. All of them were here, dead, orbiting Earth. The captain ordered a closer scan of the planet. For a few long seconds, nothing appeared unusual. Then the sensor array detected movement. One ship, then another, then dozens. The operator's voice trembled as the final classification appeared on the display. "Captain, these vessels are active." "Active?" asked the captain. "Yes." A new holographic image appeared above the navigation console. Sleek metallic hulls gliding silently through Earth's upper orbit. Formation patterns, patrol routes, operational weapon signatures, and the identification tag our translation systems attached to their hull codes. Human. Human ships. Watching us. Waiting. No one spoke for several seconds. Then, without warning, the ancient signal returned to the bridge speakers, stronger than before. "This is a defensive broadcast from Earth Orbital Command." The voice sounded calm, almost patient. "If you can hear this," a long pause followed, the kind meant for reflection, "turn back." Another pause. Then the final line echoed through the silent bridge. "Humanity is still here." And for the first time since beginning my career as an archivist, I wondered if the galaxy had made a terrible mistake. Because the wreckage around Earth suggested something far worse than extinction. Someone had tried to conquer humanity, many times, and none of them had survived. Behind us, the silent human ships slowly changed formation. Still watching, still waiting, as if they knew we would come. In the centuries I have served the Coalition archives, I have studied the rise and fall of thousands of civilizations. Empires collapse for many reasons: economic failure, political corruption, internal war. But there is one fate shared by nearly all of them. Eventually, someone stronger arrives. The records of the Jacquard Dominion were once used in our academies as the perfect example of that rule. They were conquerors in the purest form of the word: efficient, merciless, unstoppable. For almost 300 years, the Jacquard expanded across the Perseus Arm like a wildfire consuming dry forests. Entire civilizations vanished beneath their fleets. Planets were stripped of resources, populations enslaved or erased, and the survivors forced to serve their expanding empire. No one had ever stopped them, until they reached Earth. I did not know this history when we first arrived in the Sol system. At the time, I believed the debris field surrounding the planet was simply the aftermath of one terrible war. But as our scanners continued mapping the wreckage, the truth began to surface. The first clue appeared in the hull fragments of a massive carrier drifting above Earth's equatorial orbit. Its shape was unmistakable. Even damaged, even broken into a dozen floating pieces, the angular design of its armor plating was recognizable to anyone who had studied ancient military archives. Jacquard. The bridge of the silent cartographer fell into an uneasy silence as the identification spread through the crew. "That can't be correct," the captain muttered, but the scanner officer confirmed it. Hull composition matches Jacquard Dominion alloys. Age estimation 212 years. 212 years. The same approximate age as the warning signal. A coincidence, perhaps, or perhaps something far worse. I requested immediate access to the Coalition's restricted historical databases. At first, the request was denied. Jacquard military archives were sealed after their empire's sudden collapse centuries ago. But once I transmitted images of the wreckage orbiting Earth, authorization arrived within minutes. What I found inside those classified records still chills my thoughts even now. The Jacquard invasion of Earth had been planned as a demonstration of power. According to their military strategists, humanity was a primitive species inhabiting a single world with limited interstellar capability. Their intelligence reports estimated Earth's defenses would collapse within 4 hours of orbital bombardment. The Jacquard fleet assembled nearly 2,000 warships for the operation. Not because it was necessary, because they wanted the galaxy to witness their strength. The invasion order was issued on cycle 117 of their imperial calendar. Hyperspace coordinates locked, weapons armed. The fleet jumped into the Sol system precisely at dawn according to Earth's planetary rotation. They expected panic, chaos, surrender. Instead, they found something waiting. The first battle log I accessed was recorded by Jacquard Fleet Commander Kareth Vaugh. His opening statement remains preserved in the archive. Initial contact did not proceed as predicted. The moment the Jacquard Armada exited hyperspace, their sensor arrays detected over 300 vessels already positioned in orbit around Earth. Human vessels, armed, powered, prepared, waiting. The human fleet had formed a defensive ring around their planet, engines idle but weapons active, as if they had been expecting the invasion. The Jacquard commanders initially assumed the human ships were scrambling in response to the sudden hyperspace emergence, but the battle telemetry revealed something impossible. The human fleet had been in position for hours before the Jacquard arrived. They had known. Somehow, they had known. I continued reading the battle logs, my appendages growing colder with every page. At first, the Jacquard fleet attempted to overwhelm the defenders by sheer numbers. Their ships were larger, better armored, and vastly more numerous than the human vessels blocking their path. In most battles, such superiority would have ended the conflict in minutes. But humans did not fight like most species. They fought like survivors. Instead of forming traditional battle lines, the human ships broke formation the moment combat began. Small squadrons darted between the larger Jacquard cruisers, targeting propulsion systems and weapon arrays, rather than attempting direct destruction. Their strategy was not to defeat the enemy quickly. It was to slow them down, confuse them, force them into chaos. The battle raged across Earth's orbit as human ships absorbed impacts that should have destroyed them instantly. Some vessels continued fighting even after losing entire sections of their hulls. The Jacquard logs recorded several instances where crippled human ships deliberately rammed enemy destroyers, detonating their own reactors to cripple multiple opponents at once.
One entry from Commander Kareth Voss stood out above the rest. Humans demonstrate no fear of destruction. Their vessels fight even while disintegrating. But the most disturbing discovery came from a recovered human transmission intercepted during the battle. I activated the audio file in my private chamber aboard the silent cartographer. The recording began with background alarms and distant explosions. Then, a calm human voice spoke. "This is Earth Orbital Defense Command to all fleets." Another voice replied immediately. "We confirm enemy fleet size exceeds projections." A pause. Then the first voice answered with quiet certainty. "Understood." Several seconds of static followed before the commander spoke again. "Proceed with Phase 2. The second voice hesitated. "Phase 2 will result in heavy losses." Another pause. Then the human commander said something that still echoes in my thoughts. "We've had 10 years to prepare." 10 years. The humans had known the Jacquard were coming for an entire decade. Instead of fleeing, they waited. The battle lasted 12 hours. 12 hours of constant orbital combat recorded in the Jacquard logs. By the end of the 6th hour, their fleet formation had completely collapsed. Human fighters darted through the chaos like predators hunting wounded prey. By the 9th hour, Jacquard capital ships began attempting emergency hyperspace jumps. None succeeded. Human ships had targeted their navigation cores early in the battle. By the 12th hour, the invasion fleet was gone. Destroyed. Every single ship. Not one Jacquard vessel escaped the Sol system. The Dominion's most powerful fleet had vanished in a single day. The loss triggered political chaos throughout their empire. Within decades, the once unstoppable Jacquard Dominion fractured into warring factions and collapsed entirely. Historians assumed the empire simply imploded. No one ever suspected the truth. I finished reading the final battle report and slowly leaned back in my chair. The wreckage surrounding Earth was not random debris. It was a graveyard, a monument to the moment when the galaxy's most feared conquerors discovered something terrifying. Humanity does not surrender. And the humans had never bothered to clean up the battlefield. All around the blue world below us floated the remains of an empire that once believed itself invincible. But the most unsettling thought arrived only after I closed the archive files. The Jacquard invasion of Earth happened over 2 centuries ago. Yet the human fleet still patrolled Earth's orbit, still vigilant, still watching, still waiting.
At first, we believed the wreckage around Earth belonged to a single war. The shattered Zakar carriers, the broken cruisers drifting through silent orbit, the twisted metal skeletons slowly tumbling in the darkness. It all seemed like the aftermath of one catastrophic battle. History was full of such scenes. Entire fleets destroyed in a single decisive conflict. Civilizations erased in a single day. But the deeper our scanners reached into the orbital debris field, the more impossible the truth became. "Expanding scan radius," the sensor officer reported. A holographic projection of Earth's orbit hovered above the navigation console. At first, it showed only the densest region of wreckage near the equator, where the Zakar invasion had collapsed. But as the scan widened, the projection grew darker. More debris, more wreckage, more ships. They did not form a single battlefield. They formed rings, massive circular bands of shattered hulls surrounding the planet at different orbital distances, each layer drifting slowly through the void, like silent scars left by ancient wars. I felt a strange pressure in my thoughts as the pattern became clear. "Run chronological analysis," I ordered. The computer obeyed instantly. Thousands of debris fragments were scanned, analyzed, and cataloged in seconds. Hull compositions, radiation decay signatures, structural fatigue, all the indicators used to estimate the age of destroyed spacecraft. The results appeared on the holographic display, and the bridge fell silent. The wreckage was not from one battle. It was from many. The Zakar debris formed only one ring among dozens. Older rings floated farther from the planet, their hulls weathered by centuries of solar radiation. Some fragments were so ancient they had partially fused with micrometeorite impacts. "Impossible!" one of the science officers whispered. But the computer continued presenting its findings. Each ring had a different age. Each ring belonged to a different fleet. Each ring told the story of an invasion. My limbs tightened with dread as the system began identifying the civilizations responsible for the wreckage. The first match appeared quickly. Zakar Dominion. Confirmed. But then another symbol appeared beside a different debris cluster, a name I had not seen in centuries. Virelian Purifiers. I stared at the designation in disbelief. The Virelians had once been infamous for their crusades against what they called biological impurity. Entire star systems had been sterilized during their campaigns. They believed non-Virelian life forms were evolutionary mistakes that needed correction. Their empire had vanished nearly 200 years ago. Historians never discovered why. Until now. Another scan completed. Another identification appeared. Threx Dominion. My breathing slowed. The Threx were another ancient power long erased from the galactic stage. Their war doctrine relied on overwhelming mechanized fleets capable of dismantling planetary defenses in hours. According to official records, the Threx Empire collapsed after a mysterious military disaster. I already knew where that disaster had occurred. The holographic display continued filling with names, civilizations, empires, warlords, dozens of them, every one connected to wreckage floating around Earth, every one now extinct or forgotten. The implications began settling over the bridge like a cold shadow. "Archivist," the captain said quietly, "are you suggesting what I think you are?" I did not answer immediately. Instead, I walked slowly toward the observation window. Below us, Earth rotated peacefully beneath its blanket of white clouds and blue oceans. It looked calm, beautiful, fragile. Nothing about the world suggested it had been the center of countless wars, and yet the evidence surrounded it, layer upon layer of dead fleets. I returned my attention to the holographic map. "Run chronological temporal analysis," I said. The computer displayed a timeline beside the orbital rings. The results were worse than anything we expected. The oldest debris dated back nearly 400 years. The newest was less than 2 decades old. 400 years. 4 centuries of conflict. 4 centuries of invasions. 4 centuries of war. And every single battle had ended the same way, with human victory. A young navigation officer finally voiced the thought that had begun forming in all our minds. They've been fighting alone this entire time. No allies, no coalitions, no galactic support. Just one planet, one species, defending itself against wave after wave of interstellar conquerors. My thoughts drifted back to the ancient broadcast still repeating across our communication channels. "This is a defensive broadcast from Earth Orbital Command." The message suddenly carried a very different meaning. It was not just a warning. It was a record, a declaration repeated across centuries. Earth was defended, and anyone who tried to test that claim joined the graveyard. I studied the orbital rings again. There were so many. Too many for coincidence. Too many for misunderstanding. Empires across the galaxy had attempted the same thing over and over again. Invade Earth, conquer humanity, claim whatever prize the planet supposedly held. And every time, they failed. A realization slowly began forming in my mind. The galaxy had never truly known humanity. Most civilizations encountered dozens of other species within the first century of spaceflight. Trade routes form, alliances develop, wars spread across multiple star systems. But humans had never expanded that way.
There were no human colonies in nearby sectors, no trade hubs, no diplomatic outposts, just Earth, one world, defended with relentless determination. At first, historians assumed humanity lacked the technology or ambition to expand. But now the truth was obvious. They had the capability. They simply never left, because they couldn't, not while the invasions continued. Humanity had spent centuries fighting a war the rest of the galaxy never even realized existed. A war fought entirely within their home system. I turned to the captain. Magnify the inner orbit. The holographic map zoomed closer to Earth. Human vessels moved calmly along patrol routes, weaving between the ancient wreckage fields with quiet precision. They did not appear aggressive. They were simply vigilant. Guardians, watching the same battlefield where their ancestors had fought generations before. One of the science officers spoke softly. They could clear the debris fields if they wanted. He was right. Any civilization with advanced propulsion technology could gradually remove wreckage from orbit, but the humans had not done so. They left it exactly where it was. A monument, a warning, or perhaps both. The captain folded his upper limbs behind him as he studied the display. They stayed home, he said quietly. Yes, I replied, and defended it. Earth continued rotating below us, unaware, or perhaps unconcerned of the realization unfolding aboard our ship. The clouds drifted peacefully across the oceans, cities glittered faintly along the night side of the planet. It looked like any other inhabited world. Yet no other world in the galaxy carried such a history. 4 centuries of war, 4 centuries of survival, and humanity still remained exactly where it began, guarding their world, guarding something important enough that dozens of empires tried to claim it, important enough that none of them survived the attempt. I watched the silent human patrol ships glide between the floating wreckage fields, and a troubling question slowly formed in my thoughts. If so many civilizations had tried to conquer Earth, what exactly were they trying to take? Because whatever it was, humanity had been willing to defend it for 400 years. And judging by the vigilance of the fleet orbiting below us, they were still prepared to defend it for 400 more.
Fear is not something coalition officers admit easily. We are explorers, diplomats, historians, representatives of a galactic alliance that spans hundreds of civilizations. The coalition prides itself on logic, restraint, and reason. Fear, in our culture, is considered a failure of analysis. And yet, aboard the silent cartographer, fear spread like a quiet infection. It began the moment the full map of Earth's orbital graveyard was transmitted to Coalition High Command. Dozens of extinct empires, centuries of failed invasions, layer upon layer of shattered fleets surrounding a single blue planet. To any rational observer, the conclusion should have been obvious. Leave. Immediately. I personally drafted the first official recommendation for withdrawal. My report was clear. Earth was not an abandoned relic world. It was an active fortress. And humanity, contrary to everything our historical records claimed, was not extinct. They were vigilant, experienced, dangerously prepared. I concluded the report with a final line meant to emphasize the urgency. The coalition should avoid direct military interaction with the Sol system until proper diplomatic contact is established. The response from High Command arrived 8 hours later. It contained only 3 words: recommendation denied. I read the message several times, certain I had misunderstood. But the full directive followed shortly afterward. Coalition intelligence had reviewed our findings and reached a very different conclusion. According to their analysts, the wreckage surrounding Earth was not evidence of centuries of victories. It was propaganda, or coincidence. Perhaps several ancient conflicts had simply occurred in the same region of space.
Perhaps humanity had scavenged alien technology from abandoned battlefields. Some even suggested the humans had fabricated the debris as a psychological deterrent. The final assessment was painfully simple. Humans were considered technologically inferior, primitive, unrefined, dangerous perhaps, but only in the way unpredictable species often were. The Coalition Council therefore approved a controlled engagement test. Not an invasion, not a war, merely a demonstration. A fleet would arrive in the Sol system and perform a simulated strike against Earth's orbital defenses. The goal was simple: measure the humans, evaluate their true capabilities, and determine whether they posed any real threat to the Coalition. When the message finished playing, the bridge of the silent cartographer remained silent. No one celebrated the decision. No one agreed with it. But the order had been given, and the Coalition always obeyed its own commands. The demonstration fleet arrived 3 days later. We watched their emergence from hyperspace through the observation window. 32 ships, Coalition cruisers, escorts, and tactical frigates arranged in perfect military formation. They were not a massive armada, but they were more than sufficient to overwhelm most single-world civilizations. The fleet commander transmitted a formal announcement to Earth the moment their ships stabilized in orbit. "This is Coalition Task Group Delta 7. We are conducting a defensive capability assessment of this system." The message paused briefly. "No hostile intent is intended." Even as the words echoed across communication channels, I noticed something unusual on the sensor displays. Human ships were moving. Not attacking, not retreating, repositioning. The vessels patrolling Earth's orbits slowly altered their formation, drifting into new alignments as the Coalition fleet spread across the upper atmosphere. There was no panic, no frantic activity, just quiet movement, measured, calm, as if the humans had seen this exact situation many times before. The Coalition commander interpreted the lack of response as hesitation or weakness. "Proceed with engagement simulation," he ordered. The Coalition ships activated targeting systems, locking their weapons onto human patrol vessels without firing. A warning shot would follow. Then a simulated strike. Standard testing protocol. But the moment the targeting systems activated, everything changed. The sensor officer aboard our ship spoke first. "Human vessels accelerating." The display exploded with movement. Small human craft detached from their patrol routes and surged forward with sudden bursts of speed. They did not charge the Coalition fleet directly. They scattered, like predators spreading through a herd. The first Coalition cruiser attempted to track one of the incoming ships. It failed. The human vessel moved too fast, slipping between sensor cones and maneuvering thrusters with unsettling precision. Seconds later, the cruiser's engines shut down. Not destroyed, disabled. Another human craft darted past a Coalition frigate and released a brief pulse of energy against its communication array. The frigate's external transmitters went dark instantly. "Multiple system failures across the fleet," the sensor officer reported. The Coalition commander finally realized what was happening. "These are attack maneuvers," he shouted, but by then, the battle was already over. Human fighters moved through the Coalition formation like shadows through fog. They ignored weapon mounts and shield emitters, targeting only critical systems, engines, sensors, navigation cores. Precision strikes. Calculated. Efficient. Within minutes, the Coalition fleet began drifting through orbit like powerless debris. No explosions, no destroyed ships, just silence. One by one, each cruiser and escort lost propulsion, then communications, then targeting control. The fleet that had arrived to test humanity now floated helplessly above Earth, completely immobilized. On the bridge of the silent cartographer, no one spoke, because we all understood the truth. The humans could have destroyed them, easily. Instead, they chose not to. A new transmission suddenly appeared on every coalition channel. It was not automated. It was live. A human voice spoke calmly across the void. "We detected your arrival before your hyperspace exit." The statement was delivered without anger, without triumph, just quiet certainty. "Our systems confirm your fleet initiated targeting protocols." The voice paused briefly. "Your ships have been safely disabled." Several seconds of silence followed. Then the human speaker added something that caused an uncomfortable ripple through every member of the crew. "We told the last invaders the same thing." Another pause, longer this time, as if the human commander was considering their next words carefully. Finally, the message concluded. "Please stop testing us." The transmission ended. Across the tactical display, the coalition fleet remained motionless, disabled, surrounded by silent human vessels. No retaliation followed, no threats, no demands, just patience. I slowly exhaled and looked down through Earth through the observation window. The planet still turned peacefully beneath its cloud-covered skies. To anyone unaware of the battle that had just occurred, the scene would appear perfectly calm. But I understood something now that the Coalition Council did not. The humans had just demonstrated their true power. Not destruction, control. They had defeated an entire fleet in minutes without killing a single opponent, and that realization was far more frightening than any battlefield victory, because it meant the humans had learned something after centuries of war. They no longer needed to prove they could win. The graveyard surrounding their world had already done that. Now they only needed to prove something else: restraint. And for a species that spent 400 years defending its home from invaders, that restraint was perhaps the most terrifying weapon of all.
After the demonstration fleet was disabled, the Coalition had only two options: escalate or speak. To their credit, the Council chose diplomacy. The decision arrived nearly 12 hours after the engagement, transmitted through encrypted channels to both the immobilized fleet and our observation vessel. Initiate peaceful contact with human authorities. It was the first truly intelligent order they had issued since our arrival in the Sol system. The humans responded almost immediately. A single vessel detached from the defensive fleet orbiting Earth and began moving toward the silent cartographer. At first glance, the ship seemed unimpressive. It was small, far smaller than the warships that had dismantled the Coalition task group. Its hull was smooth and unarmed, with minimal armor plating and no visible weapon mounts. A diplomatic craft. Even so, every sensor aboard our vessel remained locked onto it. After everything we had witnessed, no one on the crew underestimated human capabilities anymore. The ship approached calmly and matched our orbital velocity with precise control. Seconds later, a docking request appeared on the captain's console. The message was brief: "Request permission to board." The captain looked toward me. "As the mission archivist, you will attend this meeting," he said. I nodded slowly. Part of me had waited my entire career for this moment. Another part of me feared what we might learn. The airlock chamber was silent when the human finally entered. The individual looked ordinary. That was the first surprise. Humanity had been mythologized in countless fragmented records across the galaxy. Warriors of terrifying resilience, survivors of endless conflict, a species that refused extinction. I expected something imposing. Instead, the human appeared tired. Their body structure matched the historical records: 2 arms, 2 legs, upright posture, expressive facial musculature. Their clothing was simple, dark fabric marked only with a small symbol near the chest. But their eyes carried a weight I had seen only in veterans of long wars. The humans studied the room quietly as the airlock sealed behind them. Then they spoke. "Ambassador Elena Reyes, representative of Earth." Their voice held none of the aggression one might expect from a species that had just defeated an entire fleet. If anything, they sounded
patient. Our captain stepped forward first. "Captain Velron of the coalition vessel Silent Cartographer," he replied. The formal greetings concluded quickly. Protocol required several minutes of diplomatic introductions, but the tension in the room made the rituals feel unnecessary. Finally, the captain turned toward me. "Archivist Seltharin will lead the inquiry." The human ambassador shifted their gaze toward me. Those eyes studied me carefully, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. I activated my recording device. "Ambassador Reyes," I began, "the Coalition seeks to understand your current position in the galaxy." The human nodded once. "That seems fair." I hesitated before asking the question that had occupied my thoughts since we arrived. Our historical records suggest humanity never expanded beyond this system, yet your technological capabilities clearly allow interstellar travel. The ambassador did not answer immediately. Instead, they walked slowly toward the observation window overlooking Earth. For several seconds, they simply watched their world rotating beneath us. When they finally spoke, their voice was softer than before. "We tried." The words were simple, but they carried a depth that silenced the entire chamber. "We explored the stars," the ambassador continued, "long before most of the civilizations you've identified in those debris fields." I felt a ripple of surprise through the crew. Humanity had begun exploring the galaxy earlier than we realized. "But every time we encountered another species," Reyes said quietly, "the pattern repeated." They turned back toward us. First came fear. The ambassador's gaze moved across the assembled officers. Then came invasion. No one spoke, because we had already seen the evidence of that pattern floating around their planet. Reyes continued. "Some civilizations believed we were dangerous. Others believed we were weak. Some simply wanted our resources." The human shrugged slightly. "Motivations didn't matter much. The result was always the same." Another pause. Then the ambassador spoke the words that finally revealed the truth behind Earth's centuries of isolation. "We realized something about ourselves." I leaned forward slightly. "What was that?" The human gave a faint, almost weary smile. "Humans are very hard to conquer." The statement was delivered without arrogance, just quiet observation. "And the more enemies we fight," the ambassador added, "the better we get at fighting them." A subtle chill moved through the room, because that truth had already been proven by 4 centuries of orbital wreckage. So we faced a choice: keep expanding or stay home. I asked the question before I could stop myself. "Why would you choose isolation?" The ambassador met my gaze again. "Because expansion creates fear." They gestured toward the holographic displays still showing the debris rings around Earth. "If we built an empire, if we started conquering territory, eventually the rest of the galaxy would unite against us." The human's voice remained calm. "History shows that happens a lot." They weren't wrong. Coalitions, alliances, defensive pacts, all formed in response to rapidly expanding empires. So, instead, we made a different decision. The ambassador pointed toward Earth. "We stayed." The simplicity of the statement felt almost surreal. "You confined yourselves to a single world?" I asked. "Not confined," Christ corrected gently. "Defended." Another pause settled over the chamber. Then the ambassador delivered the final piece of the puzzle. "If humanity becomes an empire," they said quietly, "we eventually lose." The statement confused several members of the crew, but Reyes clarified. "Empires collapse. They always do." Their gaze returned to Earth. "But a fortress?" The ambassador smiled faintly. "A fortress can survive forever." I slowly absorbed the implication. Humanity had not failed to expand. They had chosen not to. They fortified their home, prepared for invasion, and waited. Because every species that feared humanity eventually tried the same thing: attack first. And the humans had built an entire civilization around surviving those attacks. Earth turned slowly beneath us, its oceans reflecting the distant light of its star. The fortress planet, guarded by centuries of experience, guarded by a species that had already defeated dozens of empires. And suddenly, I understood why the humans never bothered clearing the wreckage from orbit. It was not just a warning, it was a reminder. For them, for us, for anyone who might arrive in the future believing Earth was an easy conquest. The ambassador noticed my expression. "You're thinking something," Reyes said. I hesitated. Then I asked the question that still lingered in my mind. If you planned to remain here, if you expected the galaxy to keep attacking, why keep the broadcast active? The ambassador looked back toward the stars beyond the observation window. For several seconds they said nothing. Then they answered. "Because sometimes," the human paused, "someone actually listens."
For most of my career as an archivist, I believed history followed predictable patterns. Empires fought over territory, wars were waged for resources, planets were conquered for strategic advantage. The motivations behind conflict were always the same: power, control, survival. Yet the Sol system defied all of those assumptions. Earth possessed no rare stellar anomalies, no valuable mineral concentrations that could not be found elsewhere, no hyperspace corridors that granted strategic control of nearby sectors. By every metric the Coalition used to evaluate planetary importance, Earth should have been irrelevant. And yet dozens of empires had tried to conquer it. The question had haunted me since we first discovered the graveyard orbiting the planet. Why? I finally asked the question as Ambassador Reyes and I stood alone near the observation window. The rest of the crew had withdrawn to give us privacy for what the captain called sensitive historical clarification. But the truth was simpler. Everyone wanted the same answer. I turned toward the human ambassador. "Ambassador Reyes," I said quietly, "there is something I still do not understand." The human leaned lightly against the railing beside the window. "Go ahead." I gestured toward the holographic display of the orbital wreckage rings. So many empires attempted to conquer Earth. The ambassador nodded slightly. "Yes, but why?" Reyes did not answer immediately. Instead, they studied the floating wreckage fields circling their world. Hundreds of broken ships, thousands of lost lives, centuries of war. When the ambassador finally spoke, their voice carried the weight of old memories. "Because of us." I blinked. "The planet?" "No," Reyes replied calmly. "The species." The answer seemed almost too simple. "You mean humanity itself?" "Yes." The ambassador crossed his arms and continued watching the stars. "The galaxy learned something about humans a long time ago." I activated my recorder again. "What did they learn?" Reyes smiled faintly, though there was no amusement in the expression. "That we're useful." The word felt strangely cold. Useful how? The ambassador turned to face me. "Humans adapt quickly." That much I already knew from historical fragments. Our bodies tolerate a wide range of environments: high gravity, low oxygen, extreme temperatures. The human tapped a finger lightly against the glass window. "We survive things most species consider impossible." I remembered the ancient records describing Earth itself, a world with unusually high gravity and unpredictable climate patterns, conditions that had shaped human evolution. "Early explorers from other civilizations noticed this," Reyes said. "They saw how quickly humans learned new technologies, how effectively they handled unfamiliar tools, how they solved problems under pressure." The ambassador's voice grew quieter, and they realized something else. "What?" I asked. Reyes looked directly into my eyes. "We make very good soldiers." A slow chill spread through my thoughts. "Not just soldiers," the ambassador added. "Explorers, engineers, colonists, workers in environments too dangerous for most species." The implication finally began to form. Empires wanted humans. Yes. The ambassador's expression hardened slightly.
Some wanted to recruit us. I suspected there was more to that statement. And the others? I asked. Reyes's answer was immediate. They wanted us to own us. Silence filled the observation chamber. I suddenly understood why so many fleets had arrived in the Sol system, not to conquer the planet, to capture the people. Slavery, I said quietly. The ambassador nodded once. Some empires believed humans could be turned into elite warriors. Another pause. Others wanted us as laborers in dangerous frontier colonies. The human looked back towards Earth. And some civilizations simply believed we would become too dangerous if left alone. So they tried to eliminate you, I finished. Yes. The word carried no anger, only fact. I thought about the wreckage rings again. Every one of those fleets had arrived with the same goal: take the humans or destroy them. And they all failed, I said. Reyes allowed himself a small smile. That's the part they never understood. What part? The ambassador's gaze softened slightly as they watched their homeworld turning beneath us. Humans protect their own. The statement sounded simple, but after everything I had learned, it felt far more powerful than any military doctrine. We fight harder when it's our people on the line, harder than anyone expects. The ambassador gestured toward the floating graveyard in orbit. That's what all those empires discovered. The realization finally settled fully into my mind. Earth was not defending resources. It was not defending territory. It was defending something far more valuable: a species. I spoke the thought out loud without realizing it. Earth isn't a fortress protecting a planet. The ambassador looked at me. No. I finished the realization slowly. It's a fortress protecting humanity. The ambassador smiled again. This time there was warmth behind it. Exactly. We stood in silence for several moments, watching the silent patrol ships gliding through the wreckage fields, guardians of a civilization that had learned the cost of freedom. I finally asked one last question. After everything that's happened, do humans still believe the galaxy will keep trying? Reyes didn't hesitate. Of course. The certainty in his voice was absolute. Some civilizations will always believe they can succeed where others failed. The ambassador glanced briefly towards the disabled coalition fleet still drifting above the planet. Curiosity does that. I felt a wave of quiet embarrassment ripple through my thoughts. Reyes noticed, but instead of mocking us, they simply sighed. We understand. That surprised me. You do? Yes. The ambassador looked towards the distant stars again. Humans were curious once too. The statement lingered in the air. Then the ambassador added something that sent a final shiver through my mind. That curiosity is how we found the galaxy in the first place. His eyes returned to Earth. And it's the same curiosity that keeps bringing the galaxy to us. Below us, the fortress planet continued turning through the darkness. Protected, prepared, guarded by a species that had already survived centuries of invasion. And now I understood the truth hidden behind the wreckage fields. Earth was not the prize. Humanity was.
History rarely changes in a single moment. Empires rise slowly. Wars escalate gradually. Understanding, true understanding, usually arrives long after the damage is done. But sometimes, history pivots in an instant. For the Galactic Coalition, that moment came exactly 16 hours after the demonstration fleet was disabled above Earth. During those 16 hours, the council chambers across 300 star systems filled with debate, disbelief, and quiet fear. Sensor recordings from the Sol system were reviewed again and again. The graveyard of extinct empires, the centuries of uninterrupted human defense, the effortless dismantling of an entire coalition fleet, and perhaps most important of all, the restraint humanity had shown. They could have destroyed the fleet. Instead, they disabled it. They could have humiliated the coalition publicly. Instead, they offered diplomacy. By the time the final council vote was cast, the outcome was unanimous. A message was transmitted across every major communication relay in known space. For the first time in centuries, the coalition issued a galactic declaration.
I watched the broadcast from the bridge of the silent cartographer as the words appeared across the stars. The transmission began with the official seal of the Galactic Coalition. Then the statement followed. Effective immediately, the Sol system and the planet designated Earth are recognized as a protected sovereign civilization. The declaration continued. Humanity is acknowledged as an independent interstellar species possessing advanced defensive capabilities and full rights under Coalition interstellar law. I felt a strange sensation as the words echoed through the chamber. Relief, respect, perhaps even admiration. But the most important part of the broadcast came last, the warning. Any civilization attempting hostile action against the Sol system will be considered an aggressor against the Galactic Coalition. The message spread through the galaxy like a shockwave. For the first time in 4 centuries, Earth would not stand alone. Below us, the disabled Coalition fleet slowly began regaining control of their systems as human vessels released the electronic restraints holding them in place. One by one, the ships restarted their engines. No celebration followed, no triumphant speeches, just quiet withdrawal. The fleet turned away from Earth and began preparing for hyperspace departure. They left behind no wreckage, only silence. Ambassador Reyes stood beside me at the observation window as the last cruiser drifted away. "So, the galaxy finally figured it out," the human said softly. I studied the orbital rings still surrounding the planet. Broken ships from dozens of forgotten wars floated silently in the sunlight. "Not quickly," I admitted. Reyes chuckled faintly. "No one ever does." I looked down at Earth again. For centuries, that world had defended itself against invaders without allies, without assistance, without recognition. Humanity never asked for protection. They simply proved they could survive without it. That was what finally convinced the galaxy. Strength, endurance, patience. The wreckage fields orbiting the planet no longer looked like battle debris. They looked like monuments. Each shattered hull told a story, a warning, a lesson written in broken metal. I wondered how many civilizations across the galaxy were now studying the same images we had transmitted. How many leaders were quietly reconsidering their ambitions? How many fleets would think twice before approaching the Sol system again? The ambassador seemed to sense my thoughts. "We never wanted the galaxy to fear us," the ambassador said quietly. I believed them. After everything I had seen, that truth was obvious. Humanity had never pursued conquest. They simply survived. And survival, it seemed, was far more impressive than domination. I turned away from the observation window and deactivated my recorder. "My people will study this moment for centuries," I said. The ambassador tilted their head slightly. "Why?" I considered the question carefully. Then I answered with the simplest truth I had discovered since arriving in this system. The galaxy spent hundreds of years misunderstanding your species. The ambassador raised an eyebrow. "And now?" I looked once more at the peaceful blue world beneath us, now surrounded not only by ancient wreckage, but by the respect of an entire interstellar civilization. "Now," I said quietly, "we finally understand something important." Reyes waited. I finished the thought slowly. "Humans do not seek war." The ambassador nodded. "No." I watched the last coalition vessel vanish into hyperspace. "But if war finds them," my voice lowered, "they survive it. And judging by the silent graveyard surrounding their world, they always had."
Time, like space, has a way of changing perspective. Years passed after the day the Coalition finally recognized Earth. In those years, many things shifted across the galaxy. Trade routes expanded, diplomatic treaties formed, exploration fleets traveled deeper into unexplored sectors. But perhaps the most unexpected change came from humanity itself. For centuries, they had remained within the Sol system, watching, waiting, preparing for the next invasion that never stopped coming. Now, slowly and cautiously, they began to leave. Not as conquerors, not as warriors,
but as partners. Human exploration vessels started appearing along coalition trade corridors. Their ships were still built with the same quiet efficiency we had witnessed during that first encounter. Compact, adaptable, resilient. But their purpose had changed. Instead of patrol routes around a fortress world, those ships now carried scientists, engineers, diplomats, and sometimes simply curious travelers eager to see the wider galaxy their ancestors had once feared. I returned to Earth nearly 12 years after our first arrival. This time, I did not come as an observer aboard a research vessel. I came as the official ambassador of the Galactic Coalition. Our transport ship approached the Sol system slowly, following the same trajectory once taken by fleets of invaders centuries earlier. The difference now was unmistakable. No defensive alarms triggered, no interception fighters rushed toward us. Instead, a human navigation beacon greeted our arrival with a simple message: "Welcome to the Sol system." The words still felt strange to hear. As our vessel moved closer to Earth, the graveyard came into view once again. The rings of broken ships still circled the planet exactly as they had years ago. Zakar carriers, Threx war machines, fragments of empires that had once believed themselves unstoppable. None of it had been removed. I had asked Ambassador Reyes about that during my earlier visits. Their answer remained simple: memory matters. From the observation deck, I watched sunlight reflect off the silent wreckage. Each drifting hull was a story, a moment in history when humanity had stood against something larger than itself, and survived. Earth itself looked unchanged. Blue oceans, white cloud formations, cities blowing along the night side of the planet. To an outsider, it appeared like any peaceful inhabited world. But I knew better. This world had endured more invasion attempts than most civilizations experienced wars, and it was still standing. Our ship passed between two massive fragments of an ancient cruiser as we approached orbital docking. Human patrol ships glided nearby, their presence subtle but unmistakable. They were still vigilant, still watching, but the atmosphere had changed. The humans guarding this system no longer looked like soldiers awaiting battle. They looked like guardians, protecting something precious. Perhaps they always had. The docking sequence completed with quiet precision. Within minutes, I stepped onto a human orbital station built just beyond Earth's upper atmosphere. Ambassador Reyes greeted me again. Time had touched them since our first meeting, subtle lines on their face, a few strands of silver in their hair, but their eyes carried the same calm determination I remembered. "Welcome back, Archivist," they said warmly. "Ambassador now," I corrected. Reyes smiled. "Right." We stood together at a wide viewing window overlooking Earth. The graveyard rings were clearly visible from this altitude. I gestured toward them. "You still haven't removed the wreckage." Reyes followed my gaze. "No. Some coalition officials believe it makes your world look hostile." The ambassador chuckled softly. "It's not meant to look friendly." I nodded slowly. The honesty was refreshing. "Then what is it meant to look like?" I asked. The ambassador considered the question carefully. Then they answered. "Honest." The word lingered in the air. "Every one of those ships represents a moment when humanity could have fallen," Reyes continued quietly. "They remind us what survival costs." Below us, Earth continued rotating peacefully through the darkness, a world that had endured centuries of war, and finally found peace. At least for now. I activated my recording device for the final time. As an archivist, my duty had always been to document history as accurately as possible. This moment deserved a record. "Final entry," I said softly. The recorder's light flickered on. I spoke the words slowly, choosing each one carefully. "Humanity is not the strongest species in the galaxy." Reyes raised an eyebrow beside me. "But strength alone does not define survival." I looked again at the endless rings of destroyed fleets surrounding the planet. Empires that had once seemed invincible, now reduced to drifting monuments. They faced enemies larger than themselves, more advanced, more numerous. My voice lowered slightly, and they endured every one. The realization felt heavier the more I considered it. Most civilizations gained power through conquest. They expanded, dominated, built empires that stretched across dozens of star systems. Humanity had done none of those things. They had simply survived. And in doing so, they had become something far more dangerous than conquerors. I finished the final line of the archive entry. Humanity is not the strongest species in the galaxy. The recorder paused briefly. Then I concluded, they are something far more dangerous. I looked at Earth one last time, a single world that had defied extinction again and again. Humanity is the species, my voice softened, that refuses to die. The recorder clicked off, and somewhere beyond the orbital station, human patrol ships continued their quiet watch among the silent stars.